Probably no phenomena affected human history as much as migration did. So while in older times it was more about whole communities migrating from one place to another place, in modern times migration is more about your job, about your profile, about your investability. Uh, it has become more documented, more formal, and there are a number of avenues by which you can migrate. One of the avenues is you can migrate by investing into host country. By host country, I mean the country that where you want to migrate. Now, how we do it? What are the requirements? What is the prerequisite? To discuss the same with me, today we have Rohit Bhardwaj, who is national head with Henley and Partners, the leading player in the field of migration by investment. Hi Rohit, welcome. Welcome to our channel. So Rohit, to start with very basic questions, what is migration by investment?
So thanks, Ankit, for inviting me for an interesting session today. Uh, well, investment migration, as you rightly introduced, migration is a century-old kind of a concept, right? Investment migration essentially is a very niche part of the whole migration space, where it entails two type of industry services. One is your residence by investment, and the other one is your citizenship by investment services globally. So this is catered to specifically high net worth individuals who are looking to gain an opportunity for different reasons, whether to look at options of residence by investments or citizenship by investments. Uh, Before it's been more than now 3 decades, we have seen how this industry has evolved technically.
Okay. And which are major countries where people are migrating to nowadays?
So let me give you a little bit of the kind of synopsis of how this kind of industry works essentially. Earlier, it started with a concept of citizenship by investment, where there were certain nations, because they were facing certain kind of internal issues and turmoil. They thought of this as a concept of introducing as an indirect foreign direct investment to kickstart the economy. So that's how it started way back in early 90s. And then moving forward, how the global economies, globalization increased. Then there was a time when, if you remember, that we had a financial crisis roughly around about 2008, 9,
Eight.
right? And then after that, there were certain, countries in Europe which basically started with the concept of residence by investment. But considering in terms of how this industry has evolved, it caters to certain as investment, as you rightly said. So different countries have a concept or eligibility of what the type of investment is required to get certain benefits or residency rights or citizenship privileges, so as to speak.
Okay. And which countries are there where people migrate typically?
So, I mean, they can be more than actually 50 to 100 countries.
Oh, is it?
But what has happened is, in terms of how developing nations look at what kind of options and availabilities, less restrictions or flexibility or optionality, depending upon what the reasons are. What we've seen observed in the last 7 to 8 years, the most popular are the Europe residence by investment options. The oldest one, a lot of people don't know, it's still the US EB5, which is the residence by investment option in US. And there are similar options in Canada. UK and Australia used to have such options way back, but they've gone through changes after the pandemic.
Okay.
Uh, from the India perspective, essentially what we have observed are these jurisdictions. But of course, initially how this industry started was it was a developed economy, a phenomena. But since how the things have changed globally, and looking at the volatility and uncertainty, and looking at the geopolitical changes, so it's now more of a global phenomena.
Great, great. And Rohit, so if I want to stay in a foreign country, there are three avenues by which I can do it: visa, residency, and citizenship. So what is the difference between among these three?
So the major difference is that citizenship, you get you have a passport. Like for example, as an Indian citizen, we have a passport, right? We'll have certain privileges as a citizen of a country. For example, voting rights, social security systems. Uh, Residency, on the other hand, can be have restrictive privileges or rights. You might not have a right to vote in that jurisdiction, which is allowing residence by investment option, right? Or might not have a, access to the country's healthcare, other, security systems. So it depends what kind of, programs they are. But that's one of the key differentiator between citizenship and residence by investment options.
And between residency and visa?
So visas can be all categorized as tourist visas and other things. Again, as I said earlier, so investment migration, we cater to only high net worth individuals who are looking at these options for different reasons.
So visa is like for short term I need to go as a tourist, and residence is more like I'm doing employment over there, or
Yes,
I'm
it
doing
can be
some
a work
business.
permit, it can be an other opportunity where they're residing for different reasons, whether it's a family reason. But yes, I mean, there are a lot of different optionalities and variants around the residencies and the visas.
So which are the three most popular countries which Indians are going to nowadays?
Well, that's a very broad and very interesting question. Uh, Let me put it in this way that before COVID, the concept of residence and citizenship was mainly known too much in the non-resident Indian community, the NRI community much, essentially. The awareness really started after the pandemic, specifically after 2021,
Okay.
essentially, where people, when, there was a lot of moment, as you would know, a lot of, family loss, a lot of human loss was there. A lot of Indian families were actually thinking of, is there a possibility where we can have a plan B or a second home without relocation? So investment migration technically is an option where there is no need to relocate because you have those advantage, or as a flexibility that you might not need to do a 6 months in a year kind of a scenario, which means you don't need to relocate, right? Now, the awareness really started about the European residence by investment, specifically after 2020 or 2021, right? Historically, from Indian, in terms of the demand, the relocation was popular and still is popular, which is your US EB5. There are still options and aspirations to go to Canada, Australia, UK. But how we're seeing the tightening and changes of certain regulations in these Commonwealth nations, right? They do have other type of, kind of new introduced, highly skilled or digital tech visa, which are now coming in.
Okay.
But now it depends upon the kind of reason they're looking at. The top three reasons, one is children's future or education, right? So if the aspiration is, or the client has had studied abroad and came back working in India, or coming back to business, it's a promoter family, or it's some as a professional, and that's an aspiration to send the child abroad. So nowadays they look at this option where after what happens to the child's future once he finishes his graduation or international student, being an is international student studying there, whether it's post graduation or graduation, what is the future? So I'm seeing that a lot of inquiries and discussion with the client is revolving around children's future. The second is, I would say, there has been a lot of wealth creation, as you might agree with me. We've come across a lot of families who've gone through, or clients who've gone through a certain kind of a liquidation event or a stake sale, or going through a certain investment wealth creation opportunity. They're looking at this in terms of their wealth preservation strategy as well, combining with their own retirement planning maybe, or global mobility, right? Third is definitely travel. So the pandemic time where we could not really travel, forget about outside of India, but even our local cities, that also made a lot of people realize that we need some kind of an access of a residency which gives us more mobility towards different countries which we might not have at this stage. For example, we do a lot of thought leadership. So Henley, publishes a Henley Passport Index every quarter globally. And right now, there are different type of opportunities when people want to kind of either relocate or use that as a plan B from Indian, perspective. Uh, Also, what has happened is that we've seen a little demarcation of the requirements as well. So if the requirement is that it's more related to the kids, but the clients or their families themselves cannot move, then they're looking at options which allows second home or a plan B, or to hedge their sovereign risk. So this is where we get a lot of inquiries from the European golden visas. On the other hand, if the aspiration is to, go, kind of relocation aspiration because they have families outside of India, or their children are studying abroad, then it's more related to the other programs from a relocation aspect.
Okay. And what are typically the financial requirements for this program?
So it depends upon country to jurisdiction. So, for example, there is a Greek residence by investment. It's known as Greek Golden Visa. The minimum currently starts now from 250,000 euros in a real estate, subject to certain requirement, or it can go to 500,000. Let's say, for example, in Portugal, where it's a kind of a venture capital fund, and so on and so forth. I would say in US it's $800,000 right now for the EB5 investment. So it depends upon the range. So you could say that it's between $250,000 or euros to up to $1 million.
Okay. And what can be potential risk, kind of risk that one can have in such kind of setup?
So when these families are evaluating such options, it's always what we've seen is that they have to understand in terms of what are the challenges or what are the rules and regulations. They have to be mindful, and this is where I think succession planning and estate planning has picked up tremendously. They have to take an advice of the law of the land. What are the regulatory aspects to first figure that out, create a strategy.
So we had a session on will and estate planning only last time.
Oh wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think the requirements are becoming more mature, and also in terms of the challenges, I would say risk here also is that since this industry there's no typical regulation as such, so they have to be a little mindful about what kind of consultants they're speaking to. Do they have a track record? Do they have the kind of back-end support, due diligence protocols? Because you're dealing with governments, these are specific programs, governed by certain laws in these jurisdictions. So I would say that's the biggest risk they should try to avoid.
Okay. And what are the implication on the taxation part?
So I mean, as I said, coming back to that question you asked me, they have to speak to a tax consultant or a tax lawyer before evaluating different aspects, because it is dependent on individual to individual's own wealth journey or financial planning.
And it will also depend on the country that you are migrating to. So if you
Correct.
are migrating to country A, your taxation implication will be different, or if you are migrating to country B, it can be completely different.
So
Basis
they
the
have to
DTA,
also, yeah, correct. Sorry, please go ahead.
yeah, basis the double taxation avoidance treaty, etc. It can vary from country to country. Correct?
Yeah. So again, as I said, they have to speak to someone in their wealth advisor or a tax planning lawyer before they basically make up a decision. From the Henley and Partners aspect, they really have to understand which jurisdiction they choose from, and then also plan these aspects which are critical aspects, because that can actually impact their kind of future wealth consolidation planning and so forth.
So Rohit, Henley is supposed to be the the leading player in the market, not one of the leading player in the market, and you are one of the you are the senior most resource that they have in India. So can you share some of the success stories, how your clients availed your services, and what were the benefits that they accrued at individual level, at family level, without of course naming the family or the individual?
No, absolutely. I mean, for us, confidentiality and data privacy as paramount, being a global organization. In fact, if you see our firm's name, it's Henley and Partners, the firm of global citizens. So,
Correct.
being for us, we are in more than 60 locations globally, and managing, different jurisdictions, regulatory juggernaut is also a very larger task.
Complex also.
Complex as well, correct. Uh, Let me share you one example. Let's say there's a family right now who's a professional family, and they've kind of achieved their financial planning. But one of the critical goals is for their sons. The child is right now 15 years old, right? They are globetrotters. They travel a lot with the family, but of course, they find that whenever they have to travel again and again, and they love Europe, so they have to every time, apply for a Schengen visa. Now they find it process very frustrating that every time they have to provide a lot of documentation, right? And they wanted to, look at a jurisdiction in Europe which gives them an access, but not yet relocate themselves, and gives an option, kind of an opportunity, if the child decides to move to Europe, and also add to that as an option, maybe if it adds to the retirement planning goal as well, right? So in that scenario, they decided to go with Portugal residence by investment program. Also, coming to that question which you asked about, the prominent destination. Apart from US EB5, we've seen a lot of demand for Portugal residence by investment program as well, uh, because it allows a certain flexibility towards their citizenship goal as well in Europe as well. So that's one of the case. Second case, what we've seen is, and which is now becoming very common, looking at the changes in US administration, is that there are a lot of kids who are studying in US, right? And getting a work permit or H1B is very difficult, essentially. So
Becoming more difficult day by day.
correct. I mean, it. I mean, a lot of families have to essentially plan the kids' future, and if the kids, specifically for the I think children who are in the STEM category, right, specific courses, and kids don't really want to come back. So parents are ready to basically help their kids invest for the child's EB5 journey. Because as we are seeing right now, there will be certain changes, but that is something which we will come to know in the coming months, I
In
would say.
coming days,
Yeah.
yes. So we can say faster mobility is one benefit. Then children's future is also one benefit. And is it okay to say कि getting admission into college will also be easier? Why I'm asking this, because the case that you mentioned that the kid was 15 years old only. So if if I am a Portugal citizen, so obviously it will be easier for me to get college admission as compared to carrying Indian passport.
No, that's a very, I think, interesting point which you made. Uh, Henley and Partners also has a subsidiary known as HP Education, which got introduced 3 years back.
Okay.
Because we realized that from the South Asia and the subcontinent and other developing nations, one of the key reasons is also this aspect of, kind of, helping the kids' future, so as to speak, right? So let's take a scenario, right? If somebody does a example like Portugal, right? And if they're able to move there or through that aspect, because of them, if the child can attain Portuguese citizenship, ideally as a EU citizenship, then of course, technically the family is not paying an international student cost. So sometimes, the client families realize the opportunity as kind of an opportunity cost, where they see that this actually makes sense because the child then can get admission anywhere. There's no restrictions and maybe different type of requirements for the admissions. Vis-a-vis if in future when the child attains 18 to 20, what kind of admission processor they would have gone to. So that's a big advantage where they see and understand the value. Second, Also, what we've seen clients is that we have in Canada there's a startup visa program, which is a direct pathway to PR, because there are a lot of jurisdictions where even for these citizens there are certain fees. But out of the total Commonwealth nations, I would say that Canada and Australia has a certain arbitrage in the sense that if you're a PR, a permanent residence holder, you will have a larger benefit in terms of the admission cost, and of course access to healthcare and other benefits as well. So we've also seen that in Canada, SUV. Australia, we've seen more. There was a new concept which came post 2020, which was global talent, which basically is targeted towards very highly skilled individuals from 6 to 8 kind of categories, ranges from digitech, medtech, fintech, right? There is no investment, but it's a very high strict assessment criteria for eligibility. If a client passes that, because it's subject to a lot of other aspects, right? The process, if they are eligible for the process and go through the process, and if they get that particular global tech visa, that's equivalent to an Australian permanent residency, which again has a lot of advantages for such professionals, for their kids specifically from the education.
Great, great, good to know. And just one last question, Rohit. Uh, what will you advise to somebody who's applying for the first time for migration by investment?
I think first we have to understand what are the options. So, as a firm and as a global team everywhere, we first like to understand the client, what are they looking for, why they are looking for, and understanding what their reasons is, whether it's a personal reason or a business reason or a combined reason, and then looking at the strategy, then we ideally advise on different solutions. So we are technically a client's advisor, how you guys are, in the financial space, because as a firm we advise on more than 30 jurisdictions, which is a mix of residency and citizenship by investment. So for us, the biggest advantage, of course, when clients listen to us is that we are program agnostic. So depending upon the requirement and the need of the client or the second generation or the kids, they have to take that kind of a journey with us.
Got it. So thank you, Rohit. Thanks for coming on our podcast. Thanks for sharing so much knowledge. I'm sure our audience will benefit a lot from this. Thank you. Thanks once again.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Ankit. Thank you. Thank you.
You.